Yes.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone, or well, hello. Welcome to another session on Caribbean HRD TV, where we seek to enrich HR practice in Caribbean organizations through stirring up discussion in the areas that enrich organizational life. Today, we are seeking to begin our work with Jamaicans who live with disabilities. Now, if you're watching this recording, you very likely know that it is now illegal for Jamaican organizations to discriminate against persons with disabilities. The Disabilities Act was passed in the Jamaican House of Representatives on July 22, 2014, and by the Senate on October 10 later that year. However, the Disabilities Act came into effect only on February 14, 2022. This act seeks to ensure the welfare of persons with disabilities in Jamaica through meeting several objectives. And these are to encourage all Jamaicans to recognize and accept the principle that persons with disabilities have the same fundamental rights as any other person. The Act also seeks to promote individual dignity, freedom of choice, and independence of persons with disabilities. It makes sure that persons with disabilities can take part effectively and are included on an equal basis with others in all aspects of national life. It prevents or prohibits discrimination against persons with disabilities, and it seeks to promote acceptance of persons with disabilities and a respect for their differences as human beings. Now, the Act has identified several areas that are critical for the full inclusion of persons with disabilities in the wider society. And for us as HR professionals, we have taken careful note that these areas include the right to education and training, the right to decent work, which the ILO has defined as productive work for men and women in conditions of freedom, equity, security, and human dignity. And of course, you realize that this means that integrating persons with disabilities into the wider society will entail us ensuring that our facilities are accessible so that they can come to work for us and come to work with us. And this will ensure that we give persons with disabilities a fair chance to succeed in jobs that capitalize on their strengths. Now, today we're focusing specifically on the deaf community in Jamaica. And to do this, I have with me several members of staff from the Association for the Deaf, and we welcome Mary Angela Fata, Jamaican Sign Language Services Officer with the JAD. We're also joined by Bonivia Darmand, Technical Assistant and Jamaican Sign Language Tutor. And of course, we welcome our interpreter, Ms. Donette Ledford. So welcome to Caribbean HRD TV, ladies. And as you'll see, I've just reminded viewers that we need to include persons with disabilities, but we recognize that working with the deaf does not mean that we're working with the blind. So one type of intervention is not going to meet the needs of every single person with disabilities. So I'm asking, what are the things that we need to consider when creating a barrier-free workplace for deaf Jamaicans? One of you are going to take
Mary?
that one? Mary? Okay.
Sorry. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having us. This is Mary Angela. I want to apologize in advance that my camera is not working, so you will just see a square. Bonivia was just asking if the question was directed at her or at me.
Either person, Bonivia, fine, fine.
Okay, fine, that's fine. I'll come in. Concerning about the barriers in the workplace, it's really important to know that any workplace that deal with deaf persons, they must know what is really important in the workplace. For example, are they ready to communicate with the deaf? Do they think about the challenges that are involved and they should make it more deaf friendly? Are they do they write to communicate with the staff? How do they speak to the deaf? By writing? Are they gesturing? Are they learning to sign? Are they communicating in basic sign language? Also, the time, they should look at time, that the time for them to go home, working overtime, things like that. They should learn basic signs. 2, in cases of emergency, like hurricane, earthquakes, how do the deaf at the workplace know what is happening? They can't hear when there's a disaster. So what does that mean? They need to have something set up like an alarm that the deaf can see, like a flashing light, or something that they know what is happening. Make a sign for emergencies. 4, if they are in a meeting, like a staff meeting, is there an interpreter present there? If the persons there are not able to sign, then they need to include and invite an interpreter, and it's important for them to know that the deaf have equal rights to access and to knowing what is happening in the staff meeting. If they have questions or concerns about work, then the deaf have a right to speak. So it's important that they invite an interpreter. Okay. 5th, if the HR at the workplace or there's a new applicant, it's important that they use email, texting, writing back and forth so that the deaf person feels incorporated and have a good relationship, so we can't leave them out. Or if the deaf person needs information about the staff, like for example, going to the boss about communicating about leave, vacation leave, it's important that they know the rules and the deaf persons know how to interact at work and be incorporated at work in the work environment. So I don't know if Mary wants to add anything.
Guinevere, you were so thorough. If there is anything to add, it will come out later in the interview.
Well, one of the things I'm glad that Bonivia started with that, because as Mary Angela will attest, we have started a project, the Jamaica Association of the Deaf and Caribbean HRD TV, to produce some videos that will help HR people in Jamaica, certainly, to understand some basic signs to communicate with their deaf colleagues. I suppose Mary could speak about that some more, because she and your Mr. Groves are running with that aspect of it for us. But we have come up with some basic things to tell time. I didn't think about the emergencies, Mary. We should add that. But the
Okay.
ordinary workday things, do you understand what I've just said to you? May I see your CV? What about, how we talk about leave and that sort of thing? We have those sentences down, but you're so right. To understand what happens in a crisis situation, we would need to make better provisions for that. And again, that is even here, just a demonstration that if you want to do something to help people with disabilities, include them in your planning. You know, you can't sit and plan for them. You have to know what they need if you're trying to help. Good intentions don't take you the whole way.
That's very important. And then there's a phrase, a slogan, so to speak. Nothing for the deaf without the deaf.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Makes Benavia smile.
Okay, so all right. In speaking with Mary about this, you know, we've been talking for several months now, she and I. And I mentioned, I think it was only last week, I had not seen two deaf persons walking on the street communicating. No, I might be especially sheltered, but the fact is that I haven't seen this before. And it brought her along telling me about invisible disabilities. Would you care to elaborate on that, Mary Angela?
Yes, sure, certainly. If you hear a pause, it's just I'm waiting for the interpreter to finish signing. Just explaining to you and the viewers in case they wonder why there's a pause in voice, because there's actually no pause in communication when you look at the alternate mode of communication, which is sign language. So this meeting right now has 4 people, one with no camera, one interpreter who is either going to sign or voice, and 2 ladies who, by all appearances, have a head, shoulders, and arms with hair sitting down in their screens. The invisibility will be the deafness, and one of these ladies is deaf and one is not. But as you can see, everyone looks the same. And the fact that deafness is considered a disability is more a testament to the fact that society is set up in such a way that communication is more for hearing people than for deaf persons. But with an interpreter present to bridge that gap, the disability goes away. It's as if to say a Spanish person is disabled only because they speak Spanish. So a deaf person, it's a little bit more in depth than just speaking a different language, because you cannot hear certain sounds that even a Spanish speaker could hear. But what keeps deaf persons away or separate from the hearing community is a language, is a shared language. And yes, deafness is an invisible disability, but let's go back to that shared language. Blind persons are more easily integrated into a sighted community when they share the same language. So a blind person and a sighted person can easily hang out, but a deaf person cannot as easily hang out with a hearing person because of that. No, they don't have that shared English language in Jamaica. And so the deaf community have formed based on a shared language. So in the deaf community, with deaf pride, is that shared language of Jamaican Sign Language. I have been talking so much, I don't even remember your question. You wanted me to talk about the invisible. Yes, so that's why you can see blind persons integrated more so than deaf persons. It's because of shared language. So when you're setting up a workplace, keep that in mind, that if you can bridge a communication gap, integration is much more easy to attain.
Okay. But all right, you were also trying to tell me the other day, and in the videos, we'd be looking at that sort of thing. Deaf persons not only operating in well, we have many different types of workplaces. So a deaf person working in a place which drives. Now, can deaf people drive? You were telling me, you know, do deaf people have driver's licenses? Can they do jobs that entail that sort of thing? How do they manage? How do they get around? If I work in a hospital, how does a deaf person communicate his or her needs to me as a doctor or a nurse or even the receptionist at the front desk? How do we get through life every day?
I'll leave that question to Benevia.
Okay.
Okay, so for a deaf person, like they can apply for their driving license. They can use their eyes. They use that in their everyday's life. So when they're driving, they use their eyes on the road and they know the rules of the road. They know the stop signs and other signs that are on the road. They also look on their mirrors so they can know when other vehicles are coming from behind. They know the police sirens as well, the ambulance if they're going to the hospital. So it's the same as the hearing person. They depend on their eyes. Are hearing persons allowed to use phones while they're driving? No, because they have to look on the road. It's the same with the deaf. They have to use their eyes and to look on the road so they can apply for their driver's license. Some people ask if deaf can drive, what about hearing? But when you're driving, do you depend on your hearing only? You depend on your eyes as well. So also you were talking about at the hospital. When a deaf person goes into the hospital, how do they communicate? There's a lot of challenges there. Some deaf persons, they are not skilled at English. They struggle with communicating to the doctors. Doctors, they may misinterpret what the doctor is saying, or the doctor may misinterpret them if they're writing, because English is not their first language, it's their second language. That means that the doctors may try to understand what they're saying while they're writing until both of them understand each other. So it doesn't work well. So both of them can misunderstand what it's saying. So maybe some person that needs to be fixed. Some deaf persons may show up for an emergency, and the nurse and the doctor may think that they're acting wild because they don't understand the deaf culture. They're not wild. That's their natural expression. That's how they sign. They may seem like they're angry or acting wild, or, they may strap them to the bed and things like that, but they can't do that because they communicate through signing. But the doctors and the nurses don't understand the sign. So they have to invite an interpreter for that person. So the deaf person can interact with them, or they can use like a video call. If the doctor has an appointment with that person, they can do it on video call with the interpreter. So there are different ways that they can set up creative ways to communicate.
Am I correct in saying that we've had serious problems in Jamaica with deaf persons being refused interpreters in critical situations in life?
No, deaf persons, they want to invite their interpreters, but who is going to pay for the interpreters? The doctors and the nurses are not willing to pay, and for the deaf to pay, it's a challenge. So I'm suggesting that the doctors on the hospital, they make a plan so that when a deaf person shows up, they have an interpreter there for them. So the deaf person going into the hospital, they have to pay for the hospital and then pay for the interpreters. That's paying double. So that's the reason why some deaf people, they invite they invite their family to be interpreters, but they really should not, because that's not professional. Sometimes it's something private and they don't want their family to know their situation. So it's a sticky situation. So the interpreter is responsible to be confidential about what is happening with the deaf, because it's their job. But sometimes there's no interpreter, so it's a challenge with access.
Mary, do you have anything to add to that? Because it is becoming apparent to me that the situation is far more complex than we realize. Because it is true, if you go into a hospital, you would expect that somebody can help you, help the doctor and you to communicate. But as you say, if this involves an additional charge, who is to pick it up? But as I say, we have laws in this country now that say that every organization needs to facilitate persons with disabilities. So it would, I imagine, mean that there should be at least one member of staff in the hospital who understands, who is proficient in JSL.
Yes, that's right. That's important.
So
That's a part of the right that they have. The law says they need to have an interpreter there. So you need to publish the law and inform people about the law so that they know, and that's important.
well, all right.
I'd like to add a word of caution to the comment you made about needing staff who are proficient in JSL.
Okay.
Yes, that is correct, and proficiency is important. What is the word of caution is that if a staff member takes a JSL class, that doesn't make them proficient. That just makes them knowledgeable about JSL at a basic level. And over the years, as you learn sign language, you can then become an interpreter, but it takes a long time. And it does take that keyword, proficiency. Most persons in organizations who learn sign language can offer a welcoming environment to deaf persons, but they should not override the need for an interpreter. There are situations where it's fine to sign at a basic level, and everyday communication is absolutely fine for employers, employees, for clients, perfectly fine. But in medical, legal, and like even staff meetings or HR meetings, where the nuance of communication is very important, you need to get an interpreter. And a professional one, because of that code of confidentiality that they agree to. I'll give you a little story. In the court, a lady did know sign language, and a deaf person came in, and he said, well, he communicated to her that he wanted to go to court, and he explained to her about his child's mother and the child, and that where they were living, and that he wanted access to his child, etc., etc. And so the girl who knew sign language, the woman who knew sign language, gave him a form, which is, I forget which form, some kind of custody form. And it took it all the way to court. And how I know about it is we provided interpreters. And when we got there, he arrived with the child's mother together. But what we had been told is that he was trying to get the child away from her. And I'm just using this as an example that, yes, the person knew enough sign language to understand that it was custody, but what it was is that he wanted the child and the mother, not the child from the mother.
Okay.
And just that little nuance spent thousands of dollars and wasted time in court, because the entire court case was for the wrong matter.
Yes, wow.
She was being held by her family, and he was trying to get her away from the family per her own wishes, and that it was she and the child. So I'm just giving an example that JSL knowledge is amazing, but that there are times where you need that interpreter because of like tiny little mistakes that can happen that can have big consequences.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we were actually planning to speak about interpreters. We're planning to speak about using professional interpreters versus family and friends, and I'm beginning to see the wisdom in that. But how do we get to classes? I mean, what services are there? How do I learn to be? How do I become proficient apart from practice? Where do I start? How do I what services can I find out there? Mary?
I was leaving it to Bonvenia, but Bonivia, because she herself is a teacher of sign language with the JAD,
Okay.
an amazing teacher.
Yes. So to start, wow, it's big, but to become an interpreter so quickly, it's not so easy. It takes a lot of time. You have to be highly motivated, you have to be ambitious, you have to be willing to learn a lot, and then you will improve maybe 2 years, 3 years, 4 years before you can become an interpreter. So that's the first thing. So if you it's okay if you feel like you don't know what to do, you can come to the classes and you can start at basic level, get the foundation, and then you go up to the another level and learn more until you feel confident, and then you go to level 1. When you pass level 1, you go up to level 2, then you continue to level 3. And then you'll notice that, I can sign, but don't think I'm an interpreter. Don't think so, because you're not yet at that level. You still have to go to another level, and you have to communicate with the deaf community so that you can learn. Sign class is just like the foundation, learning how to use your expression, knowing about the concepts that you're signing.
Donette is frozen.
Right. So interacting, that's different. Why? Because it uses more, it's more rich in culture. So it's not only about sentences and focusing on class. So you have to interact with different people. You learn about different styles of signing, male and female communicated different. You have to talk about location, like from where they're from, Mandeville, Montego Bay, Kingston. So it's a more rich environment, and that person really needs to interact so they can, maybe become friends with a deaf person, talk with them, go out to different events, volunteer to work with them in their community, socialize and learn in the classes. And remember, you have to continue, you have to be ambitious. You can't just start and then drop it. It takes time before you can become an interpreter. Then you have to do an interpreter course. I think Ready to Sign has an interpreter course, and there are other courses in Jamaica in the community that will help you to improve in your signing.
And the UE.
You can apply
She
for
mentioned the
interpreter
UE.
job, UE, as well as UE, right? So we don't want you to go to any court or events and sign, and then the deaf doesn't understand what you're saying. It will affect them negatively. So it means that you have to be ready and then you can become an interpreter. So it takes a lot of time.
So I have a question. Benivia, if somebody wanted to start with Jamaican Sign Language, even if they didn't want to be an interpreter and they wanted to start with JSL, how would they do that?
If they want to learn sign language, they can start by finding a class, maybe through JAD on the internet.
Do you have a phone number for a phone number for the
there are
JAD?
other classes. Yes, there's a phone number for JAD. I think you can get it from Mary later on. She'll post the number in the chat and you can check how much the cost for the classes, how many weeks the classes last, and all of that. So when you do that, you can start at level 1.
All right, you want me to give a phone number?
Sure, yes.
876-970-1778-9. 876-970-1778-9. And our email address is learnsign, LEARNSIGN, learnsign at jamdef, JAMDEAF.org.jm. And our place is locking, so I actually have to stop and leave.
Okay. All right. Well, I just had one other thing to unpack with Bonivia before you go. It was about the fact that she mentioned Jamaican sign, but I have also heard of country sign, and I've heard of other kind of sign languages. So I know that there are many different signed languages around the world. Is it fair to say that every language, so so Trinidadian English, would there be a Trinidadian sign language, and would that be radically different from Jamaican sign language?
Trinidadian Sign Language, they have their own sign language, their own grammar, their own rules, their own signs. Is same with other countries. French, Spanish, they have their own rules and how they speak, how they translate to English, how they transliterate their language. All over the world, it's not the same. So America has their own sign language, ASL. You know, Jamaica, we have our own sign language as well. I would say that it's about how much? About 30% some of the language is the same in America. In BSL, in ASL, the sign for boy is here and the sign for boy is the same in Jamaica. But in other signs, it's not the same, right? So I can't remember what else is different.
What about country sign?
But Jamaica signs this as bad, right? In Jamaica, this is bad, but I don't know what's the sign in other places. So that's our culture. It's coming from generations before, and it's a part of Jamaican Sign Language. In other places in the world, like Japan, they have different signs. And I noticed that the Jamaican Sign Language, they have a dictionary. They don't have a dictionary as yet. It's a slow process. We're working on that, but it's not fully set up as yet. It has already started. So they have their Bible that is starting as well. They have, in the future, we'll see more JSL spreading across Jamaica, maybe on YouTube. You can watch more videos and learn and see more JSL.
I know that one of the questions that Olivine had was about country sign, JSL, and different sign languages within Jamaica. And so I'm going to add to what Benavia was saying. Oh, Benavia, want to add?
Right. So in Jamaica, country sign is very strong in St. Elizabeth. They use that sign in St. Elizabeth because they didn't go to school to learn sign language there. So it's their community sign that they grew up signing with their family. So that is what country sign is. So JSL is still a part of country sign, but it's their own natural language. But JSL is all over the country, is not the same. Country sign, no, these are the same, but country sign is a little bit different because it's from their era where they grow up and they have that sign over the generations. So country sign is a part of sign language, yes, but it's different.
All right. Anything else, ladies? I know that this will be the first in many interactions between the JAD and us at Caribbean HRD TV. As I said, we've already launched a project in which we'll be producing some videos as a gift to the people of Jamaica to try to bridge some of those gaps between the deaf community and the HRD community, the community of HR practitioners in the Jamaican workforce, in a hope that we can bring more deaf persons into the Jamaican workforce. So I cannot thank you ladies enough for joining me here. This is our first time together, but I'm sure it will be something that we'll develop over the years. Because in truth, and we should say it, we have other projects that we've discussed with JD. So for instance, how do you apply for a path benefit? How do you apply for your JAD card? That sort of thing. We want to produce videos that will help persons, deaf Jamaicans, go into organizations and do this easily because the persons who are in the organizations know what to expect by way of communication. So the Department of Sociology, Psychology, and Social Work, we're committed to trying to draw the two communities closer. So thank you so much, ladies. Thanks a million for joining us here this evening.
Thank you as well for having us. And
thank you for inviting me and Mary here as well to discuss. Thank you.
What I see as a possible future endeavor is to take what we did today, which is pretty general and spanning many areas, and to delve into specific topics.
Yes.
So we can go in depth with a certain aspect of HR, because we have a lot of stories and examples of how to improve HR interactions with the deaf. Then we can talk about, okay, what about deaf interactions with other staff members? And how is it that deaf persons learn? What role models do they have? How do they, like go into details on different topics and different interviews? I think it would be an amazing project.
Yes. Definitely. I'm on board for that. So yes, in fact, what I will do is bring our specialist people. So I'll bring our trainers to come to talk to you about training, or performance management person to come to talk to you about performance management, that kind of thing. We can definitely do that. As I said,
sure.
Can
I give you? Yeah. Can I give you one anecdote that is pertinent to HR?
Please, yes.
All right, so we got a call to provide an interpreter to an HR meeting where they were going to discharge a deaf person who was no longer wanted at this workplace, but they couldn't do it without full communication. And in all of the years of them working there, this was the time they got an interpreter. The interpreter went, and the person was being discharged because they left work for 2 weeks and didn't come back to work, didn't communicate, just didn't show up. And then after 2 weeks, they just showed up. And they're like, no, you cannot do that. I'm so sorry, you cannot work anymore. And the interpreter had the awareness and the wherewithal to realize that there was something underlying that. And because the interpreter had that, she was able to, with the interpreter, they were able to communicate more openly, the deaf employee and the employer. And they realized that the deaf person took a vacation, but had no idea that they had to apply for it, get approval, and let people know. Because what they were seeing over time is that a staff member would leave one day and all of a sudden not show up. And 2 weeks later, they would show up again. And that was a role model without any further understanding. Remember, they can't overhear conversations. And so they did the same, but they were a consistent worker over the years, and they literally took 2 weeks and came back. And so what the employer did was they went over the work, the protocols and the workbook, and with the interpreter there. And in the future, they booked interpreters for staff meetings and so on. So in the future, I mean, going forward, that deaf person they kept on staff, but they were also provided with communication access because the employer and the HR department realized how important it was. But without the interpreter, there would have been no understanding that he simply went on holiday.
He did what everybody else was doing.
According to what he had observed, yes, without realizing the underlying things. So that's the beauty of having interpreters. And that's the interesting thing about working with persons who might have a different culture from ourselves, and to realize, the use of interpreters, and that HR and deaf persons can in fact work well.
Well, definitely. I would like to have those conversations with you because, as you say, we can't trust each other if we don't understand each other. And so, we want to bring the two communities on a more level playing field, because the truth is Jamaica is too poorly endowed with resources for us to have so many members of our community sitting on the sidelines, not contributing their talents, their knowledge, their perspective on things. So we need to change what we've been doing.
And I think that's key when you said not being able to contribute their talents and skills, because a lot of people look at deaf persons and blind persons and persons with physical disabilities and say, oh, we have to help you. But in truth and in fact, it's a collaborative process where each group of people have skills and things that you can offer to each other. It's really not, we have to help you. It's just about opening the playing field so that everybody is actually equally able to access nation building. And with that, I'm so sorry. I know you thanked us, and I'm thanking you again. And I added more. It's so interesting. Thank you all, but I have to run.
Yes. All right. Yes.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Bonivia. Thanks, Donette. And Olivine, thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. And we will talk again. I promise you we will talk again. The four of us will sit down on another day. All right.